being really mindful of what is right for you, and listening to like what feels right. Because I can tell you, building that working relationship and trust, and then that's the same sort of relationship and trust that I build with my team, and I really believe that's why I'm successful.
Welcome everyone to the Sports Business Podcast. Today we have Jessica Kuepfer. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast, Jessica.
I'm so excited too. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while.
Jessica, you were a student athlete. You were a cross country athlete. You were a New Balance athlete. You were also a brand ambassador for them. You were then named top 40, under 40 in PR in 2018. And now you are Director of Communications for Home Harbor, a prominent retailer in Canada. What a career. I can't wait to jump into all these great accomplishments in this podcast.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to chatting with you about them.
Awesome. So I know we were chatting just before the podcast, you've been super busy. What's keeping you busy today for the listeners and the viewers?
I laugh because we're in a global pandemic and I do communications. I think that if anyone is I know every area, many people across all, different organizations and roles are super busy, but honestly, the communications peers out there, I was just telling you before we started recording that I was speaking to a direct competitor this week, and just swapping stories and hearing that everyone is dealing with the word would be bonkers with the amount of busyness that we have. So really it's supporting, everything that you're doing in business in terms of communications. So all your plans for the year, you still need to execute. But then it's almost as if you're operating in this crisis mode, but something that, if something would hit the media before that sort of all systems go, you create a war room and 100% focus on that. That sort of has been PR or communications professionals, like that's their new normal. And then, there's blips that push it up and down. So it really has created a brand new normal. Specifically, I would say for communications, you have pushed past limits that you didn't even realize you had. I would say professionally, that's been this is what we thought busy was before, and this is the busy of COVID. So
it's funny when people would, before 2020 March, right? People would say, hey, I can work from home, I can get more stuff done. Now, when you look back, you're like, no, it's actually busier working from home because you're always online.
Yes.
Right.
And it's learning how to balance all of that. And it goes back to where it's really important that you love the career that you choose, because if you're going to spend so much time doing it, you better enjoy how you're spending your time. But I would say overall, it's a really mixed bag of what's keeping me busy. I've been building a new team, which has been super exciting. We've needed to be very creative and innovative in how we communicate through the pandemic. We can't do as many face-to-face live events. So how are we taking what we did in person or posters around a physical building, and how are we bringing it to life in a digital environment? So we're almost taking our plans, scrapping them, and creating brand new plans of how do you overcome that issue of, I would say the pandemic has made people feel more isolated. There was recently a wellness survey published in our region where health and wellness scores for 2019 in January, 50% or more of people scored excellent. The 2021 version of that was 15%. So how do you communicate and build that sense of community and support? And that's something that I take a great, we build trust and we build connection with communication. So that's what's been keeping me busy in a nutshell.
Wow. You are an athlete, right? And, me being an athlete, I think we both agree that whenever you go and do something, you do it 100%. But at the same time, the fuel that is there for you is the people around you, is the teams, the socialization, right? So how do you see this pandemic changing that? Because I know before, about 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, people said the new normal would be work from home, but clearly it's not working. So what are your thoughts on what's going to happen in the future from a, let's say, even a communication standpoint, or how we all work together, so that the 15% goes back to 50 and even higher?
That's an excellent question. You're asking me to sort of look into a crystal ball. You're right. What exists doesn't work right now. That I don't think that necessarily means that working from home doesn't work. I think that we need to continue to innovate and find ways to connect.
True.
A perfect example of that is I've just onboarded a new, department to my team. There's people that I've never met. They've never physically been in home hardware. So how do you create that sense of community? Mm-hmm. And I think it's, instead of changing what is, how do you change how you act within that environment? So when I look at that, it's how can I be creative with this new team? So for an example is, we are doing, what are your values? What is your, what's the strategy? What is the core values of my communications team that we all share? But then also, how are we going to have fun together? And so there's so many great opportunities like, virtual escape rooms that you can do. So one of the things that I've done is booked a virtual escape room. And then after we'll have, a conversation. I think that you can make work from home work. You just have to be so intentional. And if you don't bring that intentionality to it, then people are adrift. And it's so much, you are right. It is a lot of extra work to reach out. I think it's possible, but we need to change the way that we're doing things because people are not good. We just had, Bell Let's Talk Day. It was just, we're looking at all of these things and it's just being mindful and seeing how we can adapt. Because, perfect example is when I look at my communications, taking a virtual or a live event and moving it to a virtual world. You can't just take this and plug it over here. You need to completely reimagine the experience.
We got to redo the foundation of the entire thing.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that's sort of where I think that that's what we need to do with work from home. Absolutely. It's not just take it and plug and play. We need to completely reimagine it. And I think that we were trying to do it in the middle of a pandemic. I think we need to give ourselves a little bit of grace and time, but I think we have so many great, smart people out there that can solve this problem. And I think work from home will continue to be a way of a future, whether it's that or a hybrid. What I'm certain of is that it will never go back to what it used to be.
Absolutely. Remind me of, so I did a keynote and there's this concept to talk about where I say, it's not that we as teams or leaders are wrong or we're not sure how to operate. I think the analogy I use is that you're bringing a hockey stick to a tennis match. It's not that hockey's bad. It's just that the game has changed.
Yes.
So we have
perfect analogy,
right? We have to change the way we operate. We change the way we approach work from home versus how it was before COVID.
Exactly. No, that's so well said.
Awesome. I'm glad you agree. So now that we know, Jessica, what's keeping you so busy, let's kind of go back into your life and really look at, how did your career start from athletics? So how did you start cross country? How did you start running? And just walk us through the journey of how you came into your career today as a PR communication specialist.
Okay. So I know one of the first things that you were asking about was childhood. What's really interesting is I was not athletic at all as a child. I know that actually the more athletes I meet these days, the more I hear that they I am one of them, but I do find that when I was a child, I actually was raised conservative Mennonite. So I wasn't even so competitive team sports wasn't even a part of my reality. And competition wasn't necessarily encouraged. It's very ironic, cut X number of years and I'm an adult because I am super competitive. I love, I fire in my belly. I love pushing my limits. And so I definitely came to that realization of myself later in life. But it actually was because I didn't have team sports. So I didn't grow up with the soccer league, or any, high school team sports. But what I knew I could do was I could run. So in high school, I tried skateboarding because I was, the 2000s and that was what was around me. But then after school, I said, I could run. I don't need a team sport to do that. So there's actually some really funny first race photos of me, like in skateboarding shoes at a start line.
No.
That's how I ran my first 5K. And I just, you know, how some people, I hear from a lot of people that they really despise running. I loved running from the moment that I started. It hit all of the boxes that was really important to me. It challenged me. Like, I love a challenge. I love being outside. That's why I do sports. And even today, it helps me balance my career because, you know, I go out for a long workout in the morning when it's beautiful outside. And, you know, if I do double day workouts, it's making sure that I'm getting that dose of sunshine and everything twice a day. So it's that, all of those things combined. And then for me, eventually it filled that role of, you know, building that community that I didn't have with team sports. And I can tell you that my sport community has become one of the most meaningful communities across all the different sports that I compete in. So it built so many different things for me. So I didn't get very serious about it, truthfully, until later in university. And it's funny because I ran cross country for the final year of high school, and I was actually offered a running scholarship. And at that point, I said, like, no, I'm not. Like, that didn't interest me at all. If I could go back, I don't often have regrets in life, and I'm like, I probably should have done that. But I went to the University of Waterloo, and I ran on their varsity team, and, you know, just fell in love with the whole idea of team and working together. So then following university, and I think that a lot of student athletes look around and say, well, now what? And I was very fortunate to have a group of, you know, endurance athletes around me. So I just started saying yes to everything. I started doing adventure racing. And I know you want to talk about team today. That is, I learned everything about leading my team from adventure racing. You know, triathlon, bike racing, like doing a start line of a crit. I still to this day am not more scared than when I line up being like, there's like a 50% chance I might crash today. But just, you know, facing fears and building the confidence. And when your whole platform here is about the relatability of sports to business. I am a better athlete because of what I do for my job, but I also am so good at my job because I am an athlete. And, you know, that winning mindset was something that I cultivated by just trying sports, because I can tell you with certainty that I was not a very confident person when I was in university. But sport has actually developed that in me, because you get to play out in, you know, in your 1 hour workout in the morning, all a mini version of all the trials that you're going to have during the day. And we recently, my boyfriend and I recently launched a endurance club. So we do training sessions some mornings. And one of our athletes said, you know, if I can do these VO2 max intervals in the morning, I feel like anything I do for the rest of the day is nothing. And starting a day like that is like, it sets you up for success.
You're preaching to the choir. This is why we have folks like you on the podcast, Jessica. This is awesome. I mean, there's so much power in just getting in a great workout in the morning, just for health reasons, but also, like you said, it actually changes your life at work. It makes you feel more productive. It makes you manage your team better. I mean, yes. Looking back, and, you know, what was the success behind some of the teams I managed? I wasn't a great leader. It was just because I'm like, hey, what would my coach do in this moment that I can do for my team? It's simple as that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, so for you, you're in university and you're racing, and then you leave university, you start saying yes to everything. How did that experience get you into the communications, the PR side of things?
So this is the interesting part. It did and it didn't. I applied, you know, it's more the same principles that I applied. So the similar path when we're talking about career, when I left university, was I had the same feeling of, well, now what? And I truthfully, like, I was an English literature major with a French minor. I was fully intending on being a teacher. And I missed like the fundamental piece if you decide to do something is like actually make sure that you like don't just talk about it, like get in a classroom and see what it's all about. So I did that and I realized I hated it. I was like, this is not going to work. And then so now I've ended university. I have my, education, and and for, an early 20 something, that literally feels like the end of the world. With a
Absolutely.
little bit of time behind me, it's like, okay, like you've got time to figure this out. But I'm like, oh my gosh, I've ruined my life now. I don't know what I'm doing.
And this is the story that many student athletes every year feel. So I think your story is going to really resonate with a lot of them. So please continue.
Well, the best thing that I did, the best piece of advice is I went to a career advisor through the university. Waterloo was awesome that they set us up with that free service. So and again, being a yes person and wanting to, the way I've been successful is just pulling every lever that is available to me. So I was like, this is available. Like one of the things both in sports and also in life is what is just the next thing that I can do? Like, I don't need, like, it was so big that I had no idea what I was going to do. The next best thing that I could do is just go talk to a career advisor. What she said to me was, we talked everything through, and I was feeling anxious. And she's like, have you ever heard of the chaos theory? And I said, no. She's like, this is most people's career. The chaos theory means that you're going to be traveling this way and you feel like it's the right direction, and you're going to be blindsided of nowhere with an opportunity here. And it's up to you whether you take it. But most people's careers are built on the chaos theory, where you can map it out, but chances are that the opportunities are just the ones that you say yes to, and that dictates your direction. That was exactly what happened to me, because at the time I was working for a journal out of like a part of the media out of the university, and they offered me a job as their advertising manager. So I stayed on. At the time, I was also, and I was like, I'm going to network. I'm going to, I was a personal trainer for a while. I was just trying on every hat that I could, getting to know, asking questions, taking people out for coffee that I really admired as mentors, and just asking them a ton of questions. And then I stumbled across the person who is my boss today. So he at the time was a manager at Home Hardware. And so he had invited me in for coffee to just talk about public relations. And I left that meeting being like, I will work for this person. It wasn't even the role. I said, this is the type of leader that I want to work for. So I quite frankly, I took the same intensity that I take to a training plan. I put a schedule in my calendar, and I followed up with this poor man like every 3 months, was just like, here's all the skills that I've been working on. Like, I'm very interested in a role, like, and I just worked until I got it was a marketing floater role at Home Hardware. But I do remember it was a risk, because it was a 3-month contract, and I joined. But I remember coming into work and I dressed up, and I was working on, admin level things. But my mindset is, I will do the best job that they've ever seen on this thing. Within a month and a half, an opportunity opened up on this man's team, and I joined as a public relations coordinator. I took, courses to support that. And, he still is my boss, but now he's a VP and I'm a director, right? Like, it's like, it is, so there is planning, there is preparing, but it also is, being really mindful of what is right for you. And listening to like what feels right, because I can tell you, building that working relationship and trust, and then that's the same sort of relationship and trust that I build with my team, and I really believe that's why I'm successful.
You said yes to opportunities that were around you and available to you. I think a lot of people, and I mentor some people, and there's a lot of younger student athletes, or even folks in corporations that have so much available to them, but they just don't ask.
Yes.
Right. It's just like, just as you said, the next thing that's available to you.
Yes.
And eventually you will lead somewhere where you'll say, aha, this is a great opportunity for me. Whether or not I should take it or not, that's up to you at that point. But it's about making positive, just like you would use a running analogy, just keep moving forward.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm.
It to your point, it actually is shocking to me how many, because you want to give back. I've had so many incredible mentors who have like spoken into my life and given me so many tools and resources. so I want to give back. When you support with those mentoring programs or interaction, it is shocking the amount of people who don't follow up or reach out, where you're saying, I'm literally here. I'm literally here to give you anything, all the supports, all the wisdom. Like I've lived all the mistakes, just ask.
Ask.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's where there will always be that handful of people that just raise their hand and say, yeah, I want to meet for coffee. I want to talk. And those are the ones that you just invest as much time and energy in, because they're hungry for it and they will implement it.
And that's the hunger that gets people to exponentially go up the career ladder, whereas
Yes,
some don't. And then they ask like, why this person advancing? It's not because they have a better degree. It's just because they're hungrier than you are.
exactly.
Principles.
Well, yeah, like grit wins every time. It's how persistent are you? And I mean, obviously, well, no, there's a whole group of things that you need. But to your point, it's what are those principles that you're putting, and are you genuine about it? Is it just about a title, or is it a job that just like lights you up? Because I can tell you, I wouldn't be successful in communications if communications wouldn't be something that I am so passionate about, right? Um, and likewise with sport, I wouldn't make it a such a huge part of my life and my relationships and my daily schedule if it wasn't something that, it's just who I am, right? It becomes just what you do. It's not even a choice anymore.
Yeah. You said something about how you manage your team. Can you dive a little deeper into that, Jessica? Like, what is it about you use from sports to manage your team today, and how are you overcoming the chaos in business with those same principles?
So I'm going to go back to adventure racing with this one. So that was really eye-opening to me, because I tended to be, when all the personality testing you do, I'm like very competitive, and I did endurance sports. So that tends to be like a narrow focus, very me. And you can't be a leader if you're going, well, you can be a leader. You're just not going to be a great leader if it's all about you. And so when I started adventure racing, that unlocked something in me to really understand. So adventure racing, for anyone who has not heard about it, it's a handful of different sports. So you're orienteering. The really cool thing about it is you don't actually know where you're going. You have an idea, but along the way, you're given a map at the very start of the race. And there's checkpoints along the race that you need to find. And you need to punch this passport to prove that you were there. And each one of these checkpoints lead to the finish line. And along the way, and this is, a short version of this race is 6 hours. The World Championships is 6 days. So it is like, and you manage your sleep strategy. There's a formal team is a team of 4. So there's often 3 males and 1 female. But there could be a mixture. They're just rules have to be an official team. You need to have 1 female. And the sports are, you orienteer using the map, you are mountain biking, you are rock climbing, you are running, and you're kayaking or canoeing. So you mix all these sports together. You mix all these different like strategies, because there's so many different ways that you can reach these checkpoints. But then you have 4 team members, and they all have different levels, different emotions, different ways they deal with the sleep deprivation, because sometimes you go 3 days without sleeping. And how are you handling that and each person on your team has a different role? So the perfect example is the person who is, the captain is often the person who's, orienteering, and you'll have a person who's supporting, but you need to have trust. But if that person gets you lost and you are tired and you are hungry and you are grumpy, like, how are you going to react? And I'll never forget, it was the national championships, I think in 2018. And I was coming down with like a flu, and it was a 24-hour race. So normally I do okay with those. But it was the morning of the race, after we had been racing about 18, 19 hours. And I looked at our captain and I just said, I'm done. Like, I will not, I'm so sick. I want to drop out. And he said, that's great, but you need to understand that there's a whole team here. And like, that's not an option. And realizing that I thought I was done, there's a whole amount of, past that limit that I was able to go, and I was able to finish. So just realizing that, your team can pull you along. And you need to be that captain when you have people who are saying, I'm done, I can't do this, is realizing, showing people that where they think their limits are so much beyond that. It also means that, we were always checking in adventure racing. Have you eaten? Have you been drinking water? Like checking in with everyone. Are you taking care of all the different things for your well-being, for your business? Like, are you looking after yourself? So communication. And then the other piece that I've learned is, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And I say that kindly, but that just means that everyone needs to come along for the ride. It can't just be about you. It can't just be about your top performers. How do you get everyone along for the ride? So using the principles that you learn in sport, those are some of the key things that I think directly apply. And then just having fun. Like fun, it needs to be such a big part of it. I have managers that, I have thrown things at them over the last year that I don't even know how they have shouldered it, but they do it with so much, energy and passion. And I need to model that for them every single day. They wouldn't be able to do that if I wouldn't make sure, like, there's no room for negativity when you're leading teams. And that's in sport as well.
Especially in the middle of a pandemic. That's the last thing you want. Yeah.
And exactly. So the way that I view it right now is, my team is just maybe on hour 68 of a, 6-day adventure race. They're really tired. But the finish line of this pandemic seems, so far away. What am I focusing on right now to keep them moving? How are we motivating? I know in the race, we'd sing songs, we would, talk, we would, just have really great conversation. What are we doing to support our teams through this? It's all relatable. And the cool thing is in sport, you just get to live it out before you need to do it when it affects people's everyday and their careers.
I think as a leader, you bring up a great point where you have to know what are individual strengths, what are the individual motivational triggers. And it's your job as a leader to perhaps adapt your style based on the individuals, right? The second thing you bring up, which I think is so important, but in my experience, it's the biggest gap in corporations today. It's celebrating. So a quick example from my, story is, so for technology projects are always, if you're going to reshuffle something, it takes a long time. You got to pilot something, you have to then implement something. And then by the time you get results, for example, building and launching an app, that's a huge 1 to 2 year project. So how do you keep a team motivated and actually, every day come to work, put in the hours, especially when things are going wrong? How do you motivate a team? The best way I found was celebrating small wins, small milestones. Just like a football team will celebrate, even if they're down 40-0, they still celebrate an interception because it's positive momentum, right? What are your thoughts on, if in your experience, I know you celebrate, you just mentioned that, but what can teams do today? What can other teams learn from your experiences from sports, especially for leaders, so that they can celebrate more and make sure that the team is coming along, because there will be an end to the pandemic soon?
Right. I think, so you raised such an important point. The one thing that you need, like every leader needs to remember, is that people want to feel like they're winning, and they're going to perform well when they feel like they're winning. So like, I love the whole idea of, and I try not to impose like my competitive nature, because I find that even in my phraseology, I'm like, oh, well, we won that. And it's, well, we didn't, but I find that competition can actually be a really positive strength to a team if you can bring it and bring everyone into the winning. So for me, it's making sure your team is clear on values. So I have a team that came from different areas of the organization. We're hiring from external. What is that? What are the rule books for winning? So if they want to feel like they're celebrating, communications famously doesn't have a ton of data. So how do you create those measurable impacts that they can see every single day? So there's a few things. Number one, it's really important. I loved what you said about how each person on your team is different. So if you're going to join my team, you will have a personality assessment. And I always joke that, you would never buy a car without a user manual. If you're going to learn, like work with me, you're going to get sort of a user manual. This is who I am. These are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. That doesn't mean that I'm not always working on them, but here's we use DISC profile. It's just quick, easy, and I have it for everyone I work with, because you're able to see very quickly, what is winning for this person. Is winning, having like very clear operating procedures that we keep them safe, and maybe they're maybe they're a defenseman, and then who are the people who are out front. Those are your gregarious people who just don't, they like, standard operating procedures be damned, I just want to get the
Let them
job.
loose.
Right? Like, so you need to build your team based on personalities so they feel like they're winning every single day. So that's really important. An example is like when I built my new team, it's looking at them carefully and not predefining roles before you get to know the person. I will always formulate and I will always adjust. Yes, there's a job description, but how can we adjust to that role? So then what you do lights you up every single day. It's a customization, well, that's coaching, right? Like, you're dealing with a human being, not a human resource, right? Like, so making people feel special. And then, so that's one piece. The second piece is, having that measurable thing. So then saying, here's our strategy, here's where we want to go, but here's your actual role in that. And when we meet this objective, like, if you have it, you actually get to wear the praise. Yes, all of us do it, but I will call out individual people. The third is just like making sure you're taking time to have fun. In a non-COVID environment, I would, take them out for dinner. Or one of the things that I did for a Christmas party, we did it a little bit differently this year. It was maybe a little like, I stopped and we have a bigger team, but I made everyone stop and go through and have the leader call out one by one what we loved about each person on the team. And they made people listen, but it was like, they're just like, wow, so it's not just celebrating wins. I think it's celebrating the people who work for you. And
Well said. Absolutely.
if people feel appreciated and like they're personally winning, they will win for you. And, so yeah.
And it doesn't cost much, right? You don't need to be Google where you're giving people free food all day. It's the small things.
No, it's appreciation, because it's not flattery. It's a very different thing, but it's genuine. Being, I see that you're a human being. It's essentially, if you can do that as a leader, that your team will win for you.
Amazing. On that same note, I mean, everybody's failing, right? And different people define failure differently, Jessica. Some people define failure as final, which it shouldn't be. I define it as it's just execution. That's my way of saying, hey, you failed, you learn, move on. Let's figure something out. What are some of the things that failure in life have taught you from sports? And how do you use the same principles today, even in the past 1 year during the pandemic, which I'm sure by some definition you failed almost like every week?
Yes.
In a way.
Yes. I don't view failure as negative. So, you asked about workouts and training first. So, if I fail a workout, I've tried to refocus. Number one, I'm always like, okay, what are all the different factors that feed into it? A couple weeks ago, I failed a run workout. I wasn't able to hit the paces I wanted on the treadmill. But we were working on like a major acquisition with work, and I was working obscene hours, and my cognitive load was so high. So it's okay, that's why. So first look at why you're failing. I mean, that's important. But number two is, I was like, great, I found a limit. And that's, as an athlete, that's what you want. I love trying to find your limits. So when you come up against your limit, okay, how can I go a little bit further next time? What can I learn to be even better? That 1% every single day. So for me, I'm okay if I fail a workout, because that just means that I found a limit that I can work on, so that when I'm in a race, I'm untouchable, because I've conquered my limits in the training. Because training is just practice, and it's your rehearsal for your race. So I'm okay for failing in training. Well, how I bring that to work, and what my team hears often from me, number one, is I always say, when they come to me with a mistake, I always say, you're okay. It's okay to make mistakes here, because then you learn. You're not going to learn unless you make mistakes and then change your trajectory. If you win all the time, you're just going to,
taking big enough swings.
Exactly. It's not realistic. And then the other piece that I always say is like, I focus on batting averages. You nail it 99% of the time. That's what I'm focusing on. But what can we learn here to make sure that we can up your batting average? So I say that a lot to them, but really it does come down to the fact that failure is a positive if you can learn from it. And so creating and cultivating an environment for your team that they can fail and they feel okay to fail, because they will fail. It's just whether they tell you about it. So if you are very confident and encourage it, they will come to you and you can work through it together. So
which makes everyone else better as a team.
Exactly.
Amazing. Well, Jessica, what's your last piece of advice to other executives that are in the same role or communication or PR that really are the face of the company? What's your advice to them to get through this pandemic with a bit of power from sports?
A little power from sports. Honestly, it's not even just my industry. I would just say, don't stop working out. I know that sounds silly, but it's, for me, that is, especially with all the hours that you're working. Sometimes my training is the only thing I do in the day that is not work. But I can tell you, it is satisfying. It is, it's that time to breathe. It gets you moving. And it gives me that energy, that focus, and that reset to be good at everything that I need to be good at. So, awesome. Don't stop working out.
That's amazing. I mean, for even when I look back, sometimes when I had crazy days, I think the only thing I would do was work out. And people would always say, hey, you're so busy, you should rest. I'm like, but this is my rest. If I don't work out, I can't perform at work. So great advice. And I hope everybody listening and watching take this advice to heart. And also great things that you shared today, Jessica. So thank you so much for jumping on. Jessica, Director of Communication at Home Hardware, top 40 under 40 for PR. Just a great story. And thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast.
It was a pleasure to have this conversation. Thanks for inviting me to be on.
Thank you. Best of luck in 2021.
All right. Thank you.
Team, remember to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. And visit tanveervangu.com for a ton of free content and exercises.